Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. This is Emmett, and today my guest is Ron Carucci. Ron is a co-founder and managing partner at Navalent, working with CEOs and executives pursuing transformational change for their organization, leaders, and industries. This is a very interesting podcast, so please stay tuned because there's a great deal of information that you can take back with you, whether you work for someone or work for yourself. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Hey, Ron, how you doing today? How's your life treating you?
Emmett, my day has been great. I hope yours has been that way too.
It has. You know, every day that I can wake up and actually get out of bed and brush my teeth, that's the start of a good moment. So I'm good with that. Hey, you know, you've been in business a while and you've been around academia of business and you've written some really great articles. As a matter of fact, before our interview, I was doing my reconnaissance on you, so to speak. And you actually inspired me and came up with a whole host of questions that I'll probably get to later. But can you tell me about what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so with my firm, Navalent, we spend our days traipsing the world working alongside executives of startup companies and very large companies who are in the pursuit of some very messy transformational change, whether they're trying to position themselves strategically to do something different than they haven't done before, or they're trying to grow and scale and compete with new technology, or they're trying to redesign the organization. We get in the mix with them and go on the journey for a couple of years usually to help them strategically, organizationally, culturally, and as leaders realize the aspirations of their transformation.
So in recent times, and I'm very familiar with this myself, working with companies that come to the United States from other countries, and there's a vast difference in culture, and it's hard sometimes for them to truly assimilate to the business climate in America.
You danced around that question so well, Emmett. You got all the political correctness you could get in there. That's good.
That's because I work with and for international companies. So I understand the hardship for localization. That's the best way I'm going to put it. What do you find in your journey through this, that some of the obstacles or some of the things that you need to impart upon people or companies and management to get employees, middle management, and the overall scope and the leaders to take the bull by the horn?
You know, I would say that one of the greatest lessons we learned in our recent 10-year, we did a 10-year longitudinal study on executive transitions and failure to find out why is it that half of them fail within the first 18 months of their appointment. And one of the major findings was contextualization, that leaders who can read context and adapt to context well will thrive, and those that can't usually fail. Culture, multicultural, big C and small c context is a huge contextual challenge. And so it's no different for Americans to show up in another country and trying to plant their flag, right?
Yes.
Multinationals who come here and try and plant their flag struggle the same way because they just can't, they're so steeped in their own norms. You have an executive who's been at a company for 20 years, goes and changes companies. They suffer because they just can't adapt to the kind of context that they're now seeing. And so they try and impose the norms they know onto the environment they're seeing with great resistance and don't know what to do.
So what about this dichotomy of generations? Because I am between millennials and baby boomers, and my tenure was kind of short, it seems, in the whole workforce. Where we were the mass numbers, it seems like it was relatively short compared to baby boomers who have made great marks in the whole situation, where a lot of that is the reference. And the newer generation, which is generation millennial, how do you navigate that with, learning the basic principles? Like, look, we need you to be a leader, and leader does not mean passive aggressiveness or dominance.
What's so interesting.
Oh, I lost you for a second. You there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you
Yeah.
now.
I wrote a book 10 years ago called Leadership Divided. And it was a book that looked at multi-generational leadership. It was a huge research study. And what was so fascinating to find was that we've made the generational differences about labels, right? And it's a relationship issue. It's not a demographic issue. The year you were born is irrelevant. I often start off my talks to millennials around entitlement, overambitious, feedback rich, don't want to work hard, want something for nothing. And I read all these labels to them, and I say, are you tired of being told you're that? And they go, yeah. And so I turn around this piece of paper, and it's a 1969 Life magazine article describing boomers. Same words. So in fact, I was reading an article just yesterday that someone did on generational differences, and it said that every single generation has thought that the generation before it was lazy and didn't want to work hard, that they were the only ones that really had passion for work. So I think we're not nearly as different as we think we are. I think your stage of life makes you see things differently, right? So you and I now, Emmett, look back as much on our life as we look ahead, maybe even more.
Yep.
And so our perspective has changed. We have more wisdom. Boy, don't you now know that the expression of youth is wasted on the young is so true? Isn't it? Don't you wish you knew now what you then know now?
Goodness.
How much better could we be? And so I think that yeah, I get, Mr. Millennial, you don't want to be like the workaholic, aggressive, climb over the top, dog-eat-dog leader that your father was, that he never was home for you. Got it. Overcorrecting that by trying to be everything he wasn't will run you right into the same problems.
Yeah.
And I wish I could help them understand that trying to not be something isn't the same as trying to be something.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Speaking of millennials, because this is kind of prevalent, because they're very entrepreneurial, making their own way, and they start these companies that start small. They might start with a friend, they might have venture capital, whatever the situation may be. But they get to a point where, as entrepreneurs, they feel the need to scale up or get better, or, just grab a larger piece of the pie. So I know when you're talking with people, do you explain to them the road, their misconceptions, what they think about scaling up versus growing?
It's so fascinating, Emmett. The data would show that the millennials are the least entrepreneurial generation in history.
Really?
They have started fewer businesses, scaled fewer companies, and launched fewer ventures than any other generation before them. I think what they are solopreneurs. They all want to be gig workers and work on their own. What I find so fascinating is that they're always proclaiming, I want to feel part of something bigger than myself. And I ask them, well, how are you going to do that by yourself? So I think the problem is that no one has taught them how to get past themselves to actually start companies. Most entrepreneurs, when they get on the journey of pursuing some passionate idea they think there's a market for, as soon as the rubber hits the road, when they realize this isn't as easy as you thought it was, it's not just the same. It's not as simple as, gosh, my idea and my product went viral on YouTube and now the whole world wants me, which is what they all have delusions of grandeur of happening, right? They assume social media will carry the day and bring the whole world to their doorstep, and that's just not how it works. Scaling a company is hard work. It takes a lot of discipline, tenacity, persistence, and and conviction to do it. And so they get to the place where suddenly it's hard, where suddenly funders want explanations, they want plans, they want data, they want differentiation, and they're so not prepared for that, right? So they just start growing by adding costs and adding bodies and adding more feverish activity without actually scaling. The discipline to add growth and customers and do the work it takes to understand who wants what you have and how do you get it to them, and then stay in the course in a disciplined way. Most of them, when you bring the word strategy to the table, they think, well, we're too small for strategy. That's for big companies. And I said, until you can tell me what you're not going to do, until you can tell me why you're better than competitors, when customers would choose you over them, you have no direction. And if you have no direction, I don't know why anybody want to give you any money.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I know that you come across also in your line of business and in your travels, you come across very successful entrepreneurs who have probably started a small company. They've moved beyond the solopreneur. They have people that depend on them, people that depend on leadership, and they want to actually scale up and grow. So what advice do you give them? So here's what you can anticipate.
So great question. So if you haven't thought about it already, know that your funders are going to want to know about the talent you have. So if you don't have people when a baby is being formed inside its mom, it's mitosis is happening. Cells are dividing in very rapid pace, right? Mm-hmm. Organizational are the same way. Mitosis, work is dividing. As you grow, roles are dividing, groups are dividing. And rather than just adding bodies at it, be intentional about how you divide the work. Keep the work that's your competitive work that makes you special and different far away from the work that's just necessary that has to get done every day. Because the minute those two things mix, the important strategic work doesn't get done.
Yeah. One of the things that I've had in my life is I've worked for startups, and they were the best companies to work for, actually, because they usually have less than 50 employees. So you have an open communication. You can make changes rapidly. But a lot of times I've seen this happen, and not just in startups, but in just solopreneurs or businesses, large businesses for that fact, where they get this confusion between scaling up to meet demand versus growth.
Yeah.
And so why do they get it so confused?
Because they think that growth just means doing more of the same with the same amount of resources. So they bloat their costs out of control. And then the next thing they know, they've got 150 people working 3 shifts, and they can't keep up because they've driven demand, but they haven't figured out how to supply that demand. Scaling is really being able to add revenue faster than you add cost. So it means you're very thoughtful about who you're going to say no to. Most entrepreneurs, if somebody calls and says, I want this, they're going to say yes. And so, sure, we can do that. No problem. And then, of course, then you get someone like a Walmart or a Costco calling, and you're screwed because then you're really going to say yes, and you don't even realize what you're getting into when you say yes to them. They can ruin your whole company. The minute you miss a shipment, you're dead. And so knowing how to scale your organization, scale your capabilities, and focus those resources on only the things you should be doing and saying no to everything else, that's true scaling. And the discipline to say no and the discipline to do it in a measured way, most entrepreneurs just don't have it. They're so hungry for more and so afraid the phone will stop ringing that they say yes to everything and add bodies and throw money at things without even understanding how unsustainable it is.
So since you've said that, the difference between scaling up and growth, one of the big factors that comes into play when you're either trying to grow or scaling up is adding in leadership, someone who can grab these teams and keep them focused. So what are some of the challenges that might be presented to these companies when they're trying to grow and find competent leadership?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, of course, is that if you've gotten to your Series B funding or your past minimum viable product and now you're ready to really scale and you haven't prepared leaders, now you have to layer over them, right? So you have to go outside or your funders are going to insist that you go outside and bring in people over the top of your startup team. I think most people today understand that your startup team is not your grow-up team. But there may be people on your startup team who want to grow up with you, who want to go the distance, who want to learn to lead beyond just the early days. And it behooves you to prepare them for that. Before you get to the place where you need leadership capability, build it in advance. So if you have people on your startup team who show promising signs of being able to lead beyond the immediate work they're doing, give them a chance. Give them opportunities to lead and grow those muscles so that when you have to elevate or add scale, you add it at the bottom, not the top. So that's the best version of a story. The worst version of a story is that you actually having to layer over people on the top, and you bring in the wrong people, and then everybody who came with you on the beginning quits, and then you gotta turn over the whole organization, and now you just lose months and years of time on your journey because you didn't prepare for that moment of growth.
So how do they prepare for this influx of A, growth, B, change, and C, other bodies that they may feel as competition or unhealthy competition?
So you first of all, it's never too early to start working on your culture, right? So I'm working with a couple of startup companies right now who are 20 employees, but they're headed for 150 in the next 2 years. So we've established the rules of the road. We've established what we want the culture to be. We've established what it is that we want people to believe makes you successful in this company and what will get you fired. Secondly, we've started talking about the organization design. So we've already figured out, as the work divides, here are the groups it's going to divide into, right? So we're one big happy 20-person family right now, but the reality is we're not. Work is specializing, focus is specializing, from the market-facing activities to the technology and operations activities, and we're getting ready for subdivided groups, and we're teaching people in those groups how to prepare to lead other people. So we're giving them basic coaching skills, basic supervisory skills, basic planning skills, all the muscles you need to stop being the smartest kid in the class and make everybody else the smartest kid in the class, to stop being the person who works in the organization and now go to be the person who works on the organization, and have people be prepared to come underneath you. So we're doing the work now in anticipation of that day when suddenly someone writes them a $10 million check and they now can go out and hire a bunch of people. We want to be very orderly and disciplined in how we bring those folks in, so that we don't have a free-for-all and the usual mayhem that ensues when you just go hire a bunch of bodies and don't know where to put them.
Excellent response. One thing that I've seen, or maybe it's just my perception, but it used to be that companies would invest in their employees, invest in their leaders, send them off for training, send them off for things that will give them more value. I don't see that as much anymore. Do you think that's going to be a trend, or will they expect for people to invest in themselves?
It's interesting, Emmett. It's such an insightful question. The thing that I see companies realizing is that the billions of dollars they're spending on leadership development isn't returning any value, right? So it's not that they don't want to invest it. They know that the war for talent is hot. The war for leaders is hot. So they know, if you look at any of the recent CEO surveys, they're all telling you that the thing keeping them up most at night is they haven't got leaders to grow. They haven't got people, they haven't got the right talent. So it's a huge pain point on their minds. The problem is the HR functions and the training functions that have been invested in with lots of dollars to address the issues have done a poor job. The problem is you have this major lost in translation factor where we believe that training, we take people out of their context, bring them into some hotel or some workshop or some conference center, sheep dip them in a bunch of generic material and information, and then send them back to their jobs to figure out how to apply that. Right?
Yeah.
I think where you see companies who are really succeeding in development changing their mindset is bring the content to their work. Don't bring them out of their context to get the content. Bring the learning in. Make the best material you have to train somebody is the future. So the leaders who are working on solving your toughest problems, that problem is the greatest engine you have to develop them. So bring the content to their work. Don't take them away from their work to develop them, because then they have nowhere to apply it. So make there be no light of day between the capabilities you need them to learn and the issues and opportunities you need them to apply that learning to. And that's when you see development really happen quickly.
Awesome. One of the things that I can recall is, remember 2008 when everything fell apart? Well, I had to look for a job myself. Didn't want to because I was doing my thing, but you know how wives are. They're like, you need a job. And I remember this and saying it to myself. I was looking at these positions and I'm reading them and I'm saying the best person for that job has left because you've made it so very succinct in what you're looking for. The only person that can do it is the person who was probably there, and you should have retained him or her to do it. Do you see that continuing, or are people ready to bring people in and build them to their mold or pull them onto their board?
I see a lot of companies scaling aggressively and hiring aggressively. I don't know that I see them doing it well, because they don't know how to select, right? So they just go out, and if you can produce breath on a mirror, you're in. And so the problem is they're not being thoughtful about what capabilities they need, what talent they need, and how would they know the person they're looking at is a good fit for it or not. And then so 6 months later you have this, they weren't a good fit, and then they're getting dumped out. So I see lots of open jobs in companies in my client organizations that they can't fill because they can't find the talent for it. But the approach they're taking to actually select for that talent falls so much short of what they need to do. It's 2017. We know the resume is the least reliable device to determine whether or not somebody can do a job you have. The job interview, which is usually a discussion of the resume, is the second most unreliable device by which we can determine if somebody fits our company. There are plenty of great tools out there, behavioral event interviewing, assessment centers, assessment tools, showing work products, making people do auditions with sample work, plenty of other more reliable mechanisms to determine if somebody is the right person for the role you have. And I think if organizations were to up their game on their selection, they get these roles filled faster, and we get people in there who could actually do the job.
You got some great information, my man. Now, out of the 8 books that you've written, what's coming next? Do you have anything in the pipeline?
I wish. It was so funny. So I write regularly for HBR and Forbes, and that sort of keeps my writing itch scratched. I put a proposal for a book in front of a couple of agents and publishers just to get a little sniff test. And boy, did I get vomited on. So but you know what it is, Emmett? It's a sad state of organizations in America. It's some of the points you made before about context and leaders trying to start companies. I happen to have this belief that if when you and I were coming up through the ranks, big companies were the pinnacle of employment. Everybody wanted to go work at IBM or GE or right.
I literally remember that because IBM was literally in Detroit. I'm not in Detroit now. In Detroit on Northwestern Highway, and I used to always drive by and say, "That's where I want to work."
And now big companies are their employer of last resort, right? The solopreneurs would rather die before going to work for a big company. Well, yeah, I get that there are some things big companies have screwed up. We know employee engagement is at an all-time low. We know trust is at an all-time low. So I get there are problems. But when I think about the incredible inspiration of what big companies can do at scale that little companies can't, I feel like we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. I love speaking of Detroit, what Mary Barra is doing at GM. I love some of the things that Google. Not everybody can be Google, but they're doing some great things there. So there is still hope for global scale. I think we need to figure it out. I think there are SAS. There are companies we can learn from who have figured this out, from whom we can derive great wisdom. Well, I wanted to go do that research. I wanted to go find out how we turn our heads again toward larger organizations and not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, hey, maybe this can be done well. Well, boy, would you thought I walked in the room, took a dump on somebody's desk. The idea of doing anything in defense of the corporation, I said, okay, whatever side of the political aisle you sit on, we are in an administration that's about to loosen the regulations on these big companies. Don't we think we want to help them get out in front of that? Don't we think we want to help them use that freedom more wisely and be more responsible with it? Don't we think we should talk about the fact that there's some great things we can do at scale? We don't have to do it irresponsibly. You'd have thought I farted in church. Sorry to be so crude.
You got the best euphemisms, man.
I hope your listeners won't be offended by that.
No, they won't.
The point is, nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody would say anything that defends corporations. We're not going to talk about it. And it made me so sad because when I think about the American dream and I think about who we are as a nation and some of the iconic brands that, yes, are no longer here and, yes, have lost their way, but not all of them have. I think we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think there are some beautiful things to be redeemed that I think if we don't, I mean, they're not going away. They still employ half of our workforce. So they're not going to leave. But the worst problem we're having is not that people are quitting and leaving these companies. The worst problem we're having is that people are quitting and staying.
Well, you mean they just kind of give up? They just get it.
They kind of give up and stay. Exactly. Well, we can't afford that. So doesn't it behoove us to figure out how to lead them better, to do more work at scale that actually inspires people to do better work? Why would we not want to learn that? So I was a little bit discouraged by that reality. So I haven't given up, but that was in the pipeline. To answer your question, it's sort of now a little bit on the sideline now to see it, give it a minute to see if we can't find a different way to position it.
You know, one of the things that I have, and we're almost at the end of the podcast here, but one of the things that I have an affinity for, and I think you're kind of on the same boat, is female leaders, because they come with a very different perspective, particularly if they have had a family, because they understand the multi dynamics of individuals, and that you can't manage everybody in the same way. Have you seen some of that, or what's your take on the role of women in business and leadership?
My opinion, which is informed by research, is that empirically they do it better. They're just more inclined to lead more effectively than men are. Not that there aren't bad women leaders out there and there aren't great men leaders out there, but by and large, left to their own devices, women are more likely to be more contextual, more strategic, more entrepreneurial, and more relational. And I don't know why we're still having this conversation in 2017 that a gender diverse leadership team is going to lead better than a non-gender diverse leadership team. We don't need any more data to prove this. I don't understand why boards of public companies are not putting pressure on their executive teams to say, okay, you bunch of old white guys here, when are we going to fix this? I don't know why we're still not forcing the issue, because companies that have set out to change it have done really, really well, and those companies outperform their competitors.
Wow. Do you think there should be a component that's added to the process of finding these people? Because one of the things that I recently began to see, because I've been a little bit older. I noticed this when I was probably in my early 30s, that the middle managers and the managers going up were getting younger and younger, and they didn't have this psychological reservoir to pull from, or emotional reservoir to pull from, to deal with a multitude of people. Do you think that should be one of the factors where they're seeing the experience, the emotional experience, the relationship experience with people for building teams and leaders?
Well, absolutely. I think that, with all the plethora of emotional intelligence and relational intelligence and RQ and EQ we've infused into the workplace, we're not getting any better at it. And so I don't know whether it's people just miss the self-awareness chip or what, but I think that, in our 10-year research, we found that deeper connections below you, alongside you, and above you were vital to being successful, especially at higher altitudes in organizations. And so I think that, if we don't make contextualization and deeper connections and having greater organizational breadth and being able to make better decisions, if we don't make those things fundamental to how we prepare leaders from the very beginning of their careers, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. So I have two questions. They're very short. Here's the first one. Let's say you're sitting on your couch in your home watching TV, and your doorbell rings. And then you go to the door, and to your dismay is a 20-year-old you. And you ask the older you, so what advice do you have for me?
I would say you're going to spend entirely too much time making decisions based out of fear and worrying about what other people think and trying to please other people. And remember that nothing in life is irrevocable except death. And so don't make choices based on fear and worry. take chances, take risks, and try the things you are passionate about trying.
Awesome. And where can people reach you and find your works?
Great. Thank you for asking. I can be found on Twitter at Ron Carucci, Carucci. At my website at www.navalent.com. We have a free ebook we'd love to offer your listeners on leading transformation in organizations, and that can be found at www.navalent.com/transformation. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, so come and find me and keep the conversation going.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much. You've given me some great insights, and you've kind of affirmed some things that I already knew, which is great. So now I don't think I'm crazy. And I appreciate having you on the Billionaire Lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Emmett, great to be with you. Thanks for having me, and keep up your good work on the world.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this one thing. This is the Billionaire Lifestyle. You have the Billionaire Lifestyle. There's a billion cells, there's a billion thoughts, there's emotions that have started since you were a baby. So that makes you a miracle. Don't ever forget that. If you ever need to look into the eyes of someone who really loves you, look in the mirror. Because deep down inside, there's someone who cares, and you just have to listen to your own truth. Till next time, have an awesome day.